Hold on. Okay, I'm holding on.
There you go.
I think they're around today. Perfect. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you all for the opportunity and also for all the time in early November. We did do an orientation session, so some of this will be repeat for some of the members that weren't there, but I'll move expeditiously through that. We do have a fairly aggressive agenda today. Graduate tuition, housing and dining rates, major capital project financial plans that we discussed in G yesterday, a pre-authorization for the issuance of general obligation bonds, and then discussion around strategic investment fund. And last but not least, I do need signatory authority approval per contract. So with that, very quickly, just to underpin everything that we do, UVA is a phenomenal place to work and go to school and receive patient care, and always important to just like level set sort of what we are about and what we do. So 32,000 person workforce, a $5.8 billion operating budget. Some of the levers today we're going to ask you to approve are the graduate tuition and housing and dining that are pieces of the overall operating budget. Ian touched on yesterday sponsored research awards. I'm also very excited to let you all know we received this morning an official S&P rating. We have been maintaining our AAA rating and with a stable outlook. So kudos to Julie Richardson and the entire team for all the work leading up to that. We will electronically send out the full analysis of the UVA. But that was pretty incredible. The rating agencies have been mixed overall around the higher education environment in general. S&P, again, rating us as only one of 4 in the country, at AAA rated by all 3 institutions. And again, we'll send out some additional materials that just came in at 7:30 this morning. So anchoring on our bond rating is obviously critical, particularly as we talk about some of the things moving forward. As you know, we're particularly proud of the value that we provide to our students and families, which is recognized in part in our high rankings in UVA and in Virginia as well as nationally. We are the #1 public in Virginia according to Forbes, #1 public in financial aid, and the #1 best value. Leonard Sandridge told me last night, please just don't screw it up. So that was his message to me last night at dinner, so feeling the pressure this morning. Next, Newsweek just ranked UVA as the best hospital, and then again, safety grade A ratings, and Craig spoke to that yesterday. In addition to that, and you will hear from Chancellor Henry later today, the college at Wise continues to provide exceptional educational experience, and best bang for the buck was one of my best, I thought, taglines for the recognition that they received, and that was from the higher ed institution. She has lots and lots of great news later today, so I don't want to steal her thunder. So again, at a macro level, this just shows our overall financial framework and the fiscal levers that we use to support our strategic priorities. As you know, last June, you approved the 2025 operating budget for the academic division, the medical center, and UVA Wise. And this just gives you, obviously, we always have to have more sources than uses. We have to have a balanced budget. And obviously, we also have the strategic investment fund, which underpins a lot of our efforts on the 2030 plan, which Jim and I will speak to shortly. So a couple of things here. What supports these rankings and all that we do is our superior value proposition, what we offer to students, families, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And obviously, we're focused in on affordability and accessibility, coupled with great academic excellence and career preparedness. So really quickly, because there was a lot of discussion in the November, is sort of what are we doing around how do we maintain both being affordable and high quality, and a lot of that is continuing to drive for reallocations and efficiencies within the organization, not just the academic, but the medical center and at College of Wise. We highlighted for you in November in each of key areas operational reorganizations to save funds, unit level reallocations, technological improvements, and where we can collaborate with other state agencies to really harness the power of bulk purchasing. Moving forward, and I would be remiss if I also didn't say WISE is also very, very cognizant about being efficient and effective. They've done a lot of work as well. They've restructured their debt. And we've been doing a lot of things where they can go onto our systems to save real costs. So we're continuing this journey on efficiency and effectiveness as part of the fiscal year 25 budget. There were 3 key themes that emerged in our work. One was really thinking about the people and the organization and how to be as efficient as possible. 2 is how do we optimize and scale our operations? And how, third, can we use technology as an enabler? I want to stop and really dive just very quickly on some of the things that are in the fiscal year 25 budget and items that we are now working on for fiscal year 26. Specifically in the 25 budget in the areas of Together We're Better, we have been able to save approximately $5 million in savings by bulk purchasing across WISE, the Medical Center, and UVA Academic Division. In addition to that, the other key area that we focused on was space utilization and research related to that. So we did a deep dive back in the spring and summer around how do we use our physical assets and could we use them more efficiently and effectively. I'm pleased to announce that we did move continuing professional ed over to the Ivy office building by condensing space of the core central services to smaller physical footprint. That has enabled us to start construction for a comprehensive incident command center at Zemer Hall, formerly Zemer Hall. That actually avoided about $22 million of cost savings and avoidance of having to build a new state-of-the-art command center. We will, this late in August, be able to do the groundbreaking for that, and I think Tim Longo at some point would love to talk more about it. We will also then be able to take all of our safety and security assets and bring them under one roof, and some of this was lessons learned through the last couple of years about how to create better safety and security at UVA. Moving forward, what we're working on is now how do we think about continuing to look at the institution as a whole and become even more efficient and effective. The first thing we're working on right now in the new Workday system is a data harmonization project so we can do better benchmarking across to see where there are additional opportunities for savings. So this budget process will be incredibly important because we know we always will have many more needs and wants than resources available. So we look forward to bringing information back both at March and then perhaps even a finance orientation session as we go before the June fiscal year 26 budget approval.
AJ, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
One of the things we talked about at the November meeting that we had at the board's head was, you know, there's a desire to do sort of a comprehensive look at our org chart and our personnel, and you know, any large organization is going to develop redundancies and overlaps. That's just natural over the course of any 4 or 5 year period, and that we wanted to sort of harmonize that effort with the tuition question. And one thing that we do, I can't even remember the schedules, but there's a stagger a little bit between tuition on the one hand and the budget on the other, and the information we get in the budget. And so it's sort of hard to think, because I know we strive to keep tuition as low as we can to, you know, help families and all that. So, but when I'm interested in, as we come up to the June budget approval, is getting a real good line of visibility into what we're doing too, because isn't it the case that something like 80% of our operating costs are personnel?
Correct.
What we're doing to kind of look at that and line it up with our, you know, just sort of our overhead costs with whatever needs we're going to have on the tuition side. And so we'd love to, if you could just say, I mean, we talked about that some in November, and trying to sort of picture in our mind's eye kind of how tuition interacts with the budget process, and any effort we make, maybe not on an annual basis, but every 4 or 5 years, to make sure we occasionally tighten up the belt and attack, you know, just the natural drift that can occur in any large organization.
Yeah, so we are actively now engaged in the data harmonization project, which will give us much better transparency, consistency across the entire organization so that benchmarking will be more accurate than what we attempted last June. The second is, yes, we are a people-driven organization. Around 68 cents on the dollar is going to personnel, directly to salaries and benefits associated with that. We are, by nature, a decentralized organization. So I think the question that we have to think about is the importance of individual schools and their unique missions and local control versus how do we think about an institution overall, which is $5.8 billion. And so we will, I committed, I think all the EVPs are working with me on this endeavor, continue to find ways to be efficient and effective. I will tell you, we've already done a lot since I've been here in 6 years. As many of you will recall, we did a lot of base budget cuts back during COVID, and we've done a lot of efficiency items. We are committed to continuing to do that, and we'll do more, and we look forward to working with you all, both at the March board meeting. I think also there's probably going to need to be an orientation session between March and June, and the culmination of that will be then the fiscal year 26 budget in June.
Well, I mean, the direct answer to Doug's question, though, is before the June meeting, you're going to give
Yes.
more of a look exactly the way he's
Yes.
described,
Yeah, yeah.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing I just reflect on, I know our philosophy is decentralization, and there are good reasons for that I understand. But it seems to me when you have a decentralized approach, every once in a while, someone upstairs needs to take a look and say, okay, we've had all this decentralized activity and budgeting going on. Maybe, we've got, 3 people doing the same job. I mean, that's just natural, not because anyone's deliberately doing that, but it just unfolds that way. So I think it'd be great. I mean, it sounds like we've talked about this, and that's going to be part of the lead up to June.
Right.
But I think it would be helpful, at least for me, to sort of tie that kind of effort together with the tuition questions. Because it seems they're related. If it's not one-to-one, they're certainly related to one another. But anyway, I'll stop there.
Can I just say, to Bob's point, I think that it would be really helpful if we had that information and that kind of look before the next board meeting so that we actually have ample time. We can talk about what that exactly means, but waiting until right before the next, June, or waiting until the finance orientation doesn't seem to give people enough time. So maybe we could work together to figure out what it is that we can do as an iterative matter between now and the next board meeting to get people continually appreciate what you've done, what we can do, what the organizational structure looks like, and where there are opportunities for efficiencies. That can't just be a one meeting conversation.
Yeah, agreed. I guess what I would say is I'm happy to bring stuff back before the March meeting in terms of what's the body of work that's already been done and that we're implementing against. There's a body of work in order to do a massive cleanup in our HR systems and our financial systems relative to the Workday implementation so that you can do better benchmarking data. That is not slated to be done until March. I don't know that I can move any faster because it requires...
Okay, understood.
Okay.
All right.
Right, and also understanding, you're the budget officer,
Yeah.
we're the committee.
Yeah.
We don't want to be the budget officer for the University of Virginia. Well, I mean, maybe somebody does, but I don't.
No, I don't think any of us wants to do that. And I think our budget officers do a phenomenal job. I just think as a board, we want to convince ourselves that there's, that we're tightening up a little bit. And I think it feels to me like we've discussed it, and we've discussed it at multiple meetings, including the special one that Bob called in November. And it was a good conversation. And but I mean, I would like to see some of the detail around how we're doing that, and as much lead time as we can have, the better. I mean, and everyone knows how busy everybody is, especially in the finance department. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn now to graduate tuition and required fees. As I mentioned earlier, we have a wide range of graduate and professional programs which educate thousands of students annually at UVA. 70% of graduate and professional students receive some partial financial aid, and most doctoral programs provide students with full tuition and fees. Here are some of the numbers. And then I also think it's important to highlight some of our top-notch graduate programs here: law, Darden, education, and nursing, just to name a few. Our graduate programs are quite varied in nature, and this is not an inclusive list, so if I didn't mention you specifically, it's not personal. Couple of things now. The rate proposals are done, working across with Ian's team in the provost office, each of the schools, and then all aggregated up between provost office and our office under Katie Walker. The rate proposals consider several factors, looking at inflationary cost increases, impacts to state-approved salary increases, and that is underpinning one of the largest pressures, which is we have seen fairly sizable compensation increases over the last 3 years. Obviously, we're very grateful, and we think that's incredibly important to recruit and retain talent, but it is a primary cost driver. Not only are we primarily a people-driven business, but we put about $250 million of added costs in the system relative to compensation and benefits in the last 3.5 years. So most programs, when considering their rates, as I said, is really focused in on the compensation. There have been some technological improvements we've needed to make. And then also each school and unit is really focused in on what do they need to serve their students. So whether it be mental health, career services, both central, and there are specific individual programs at the school level. So with that, the graduate tuition proposals are several pages long in your board book. There is a listing, as I said, pages 1 through 5. It's important to remember that we do not take this process lightly. In fact, it's quite iterative in nature, and we've really attempted to keep rates moderate in working with the schools, and that we continue to find that balance between affordability and excellence. There are specific notes around each and every one of the programs. I did speak with several of you prior to the board meeting. In addition to that, you can see that we are proposing small activity fee increases for the graduate schools, most notably for the School of Nursing, but also for the College of Arts and Sciences and the School at Law. These are nominal increases. For example, this college and law school are requesting a nominal $2 increase. This is only the college's second increase since 2010. These all have the support of the student bodies that they work through. Okay, so with that, I'm going to stop.
Are there questions for JJ on graduate tuition and the fees described?
Can I ask, maybe JJ or maybe Provost Balcom, in talking with faculty, we have to raise these funds often through grants to help pay for our graduate students. Has there been any thought about that and the implications of how this might impact various research labs with our costs raising with these costs going up a little bit?
Yeah, it's a great question, Michael. Broadly speaking, it is one of the things when we talk to the deans, they need to be sure that they're talking with the directors of their individual graduate programs. That includes the programs such as yours, but others in the STEM and other sponsored research fields, so that both the faculty who direct those programs and the PIs are thinking about what the fee raises should be, and so that those are consistent with what they would anticipate increases in federally sponsored research could be, so that future grants, if there's a 2 or 3% increase, that you would imagine that would be consistent with the size of the grant that you can apply for. So yeah, we build that in and go back and forth with the deans, make sure that they've been talking to their graduate directors and then the faculty within those programs. Yeah.
Steve?
Mr. Chair, not being a member of the committee, but just a quick question. JJ, you said a lot of these are nominal fees. One's only $2 per student. Mm-hmm. That's almost laughable in a budget of $6 billion, why we would increase a fee by $2 per student. And there certainly is enough fluff in whoever's budget that is that they could cut. And I mean, we need to look at ways to cut, not increase.
So we work pretty hard with each of the schools and units. And again, this one fee hadn't been increased since 2012. And I think it does start to erode the quality in some of these programs. So this came with the support of not only the school, but the graduate students themselves. So respectfully, we're asking for the increase.
But we should also respectfully continue to look for reductions in budgets.
We absolutely agree, and that was the earlier conversation, that we continue to look within the base budget to find efficiencies and control and cut costs. Absolutely.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I just wanted to point out that in many cases, these fees support activities that, again, can't be used, where your other university funds can't be used, and that support discretionary initiatives that are very important to individual faculty members and students. And so, again, I'll reach back to my student council days, but also last night I spent some time talking to the student council president, where they also recommended an increase in the fee because there are increased requests, desires, expanding CIOs, other types of initiatives, where again, the resources that can be used to support those activities are limited and they can't come from other sources. So while I completely appreciate the fact that where in the various silos of dollars, we ought to look for efficiencies. In the case of these types of fees, if there's a desire for an increase, it's because the demand for those resources are being driven by the customers, by the students, and or graduate students that are the beneficiary of those.
And with all due respect, I chaired your committee for 2 years, and we went through the same issues, and we were very conscious of trying to find ways to cut budget expenses rather than increase, but I totally understand where you're coming from. I've been in your shoes.
Yeah.
Bert?
Yep, colleagues, for the record, I'm not a member of this committee, but eventually these votes will come to the full board. I am an absolute no on this budget and any aspect of the budget increases anywhere until I see a 25, 26 budget with significant cuts, real cuts. So just let it be known, when it comes to a full vote, I will be no, and I will try to get everybody I can to vote no until we make a case that we're going to cut tuition. We're not going to raise it. We're going to cut it. We're going to cut expenses. We're going to cut superfluous programs. There you go.
Other comments? There is a resolution on pages 2 through 5 of the Finance Committee book related to graduate tuition and fees. Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good, thank you.
Great. So next up, we have several housing and dining rates to bring to you for consideration today, specifically faculty and staff housing rates for properties that we rent to our employees, student housing at both UVA and College at Wise, and dining at both UVA and College at Wise. So first, I really want to just take a minute to provide an overview on how our housing and dining programs, what we affectionately call auxiliaries, operate at UVA and across all the other public institutions in Virginia. These units, as you know, provide essential services to UVA community and support our university's mission. The state policy requires these units to be self-sufficient and cover all their own operating costs, both direct and indirect, as well as their capital costs. They receive no state funding. In addition, the UVA Board of Visitors has both an operating and capital reserve policy that applies to auxiliaries. So the policy aims to ensure the university doesn't have a large deferred maintenance requirement, and that each of the program's operations are financially able to withstand significant downturn in revenues. The auxiliaries are required to maintain 3 months of operating expense in reserve, and capital expenditures or contribution to capital reserves must equal 1.5%. I level set that because we spend a lot of time trying to balance out all of the requirements of the auxiliaries and also thinking about the total cost because of what the charges are to our students. So again, they have operations that must stand on their own, and we're always trying to balance out the requirements from the Commonwealth as well as making sure there's enough money in the system to cover all of its expenses. The rate increase proposals here are centered around costs and the need to continue those self-sufficient operations. So very quickly, first is we're asking your approval of the 2025-2026 staff and faculty housing rates, which would be effective July 1, 2025. These rates reflect all 35 faculty and staff housing units, including lawns, pavilions, cottages, and apartments. Our occupancy rate is roughly 90% right now. There is some turnover, and we're doing some renovations. The state policy does require these rents to reflect market rate for similarly sized and equipped properties, and we'll do a full-blown analysis on that. The proposed average rent increase for this year is 5.4% over current rates, which helps us meet the state requirement. The resolution in your book today allows the EVP COO or her designee to approve an additional increase if the property is vacated or the current rate is below market. So happy to answer any questions. The materials are in your book on page 6 and page 7. We would ask for your consideration and approval.
Are there questions on faculty and staff housing?
I have a quick question, please. Market rents, JJ, I assume some of you're talking about apartment units, sometimes you're talking about renting housing, and various sorts of dwelling units.
Correct.
I know it's very hard to find rents, comps for houses and things like that. I mean, how do you guys determine what is market for those things?
Yeah, so we,
Apartments, I guess, is pretty basic.
yeah, so we do have a fairly large inventory that we work with the real estate team to do benchmark of comparable items, and happy to show you those comparisons and how we
It's
benchmark.
internal, it's not an outside consultant.
No, we have a real estate team internally. We also rely sometimes on UVAF for additional expertise. But you're right, a sunny side is very different than a pavilion, which is really different from a cottage.
JJ, do just as a general proposition, do the real estate sort of break even, or is it cash flow positive to some percent in a given year? What would
Yeah,
your ballpark be on that?
Yeah, we try to break even
Okay.
and maintaining our reserves. We don't look to make profit out of this. We try to
Right.
have a self-contained system, covers its expenses, has the necessary reserves, because we're always trying to balance out, like, not charging more than we need. Again, this is
Right.
not an area where we seek to make money. We seek to cover our costs, maintain the facilities for the long term.
Just for convenience, I would propose that we take up the housing and dining together, but if committee members want to vote on them separately, I'm happy to do that.
Okay?
Okay, then why don't you
Yeah.
keep going, and when you
Okay.
get to the end, if people change their minds, we can.
Great. So
Separate.
next is housing and dining, and what just a graphic here on how do we think about the analysis that underpins the ultimate rates that we proposed. You can see here the key drivers, obviously personnel, salary, benefits, maintaining the facilities. Again, these programs have state requirements in addition to board policies that we must maintain reserves and maintain certain levels of capital equipment to maintain the facility so we do not have a backlog of deferred maintenance. We also have proposed in here looking at the housing expansion that was touched on yesterday. And then obviously in the dining program, we're looking at not only labor costs, but the food inflation costs and the dietary needs of the student body, both at the College of Wise and here at UVA. So specifically, again, housing is 100% self-supporting auxiliary operation. As we spoke yesterday, occupancy is at 99% for fall. About 7,300 beds assignable today. We hope later in this presentation you will approve an expansion of that. And the proposed average room rate, again, there are multiple in the book, is approximately $8,328. This slide, which we provided in advance, just shows you since 2018-19 that housing average increase relative to the CPI rental. You can see we have been incredibly efficient and below even CPI rental for that period of time. Couple of things for 26, it proposed a 5.5% increase. Some of the cost drivers besides labor was the installation of additional security camera maintenance fees, because as you know, we've added some safety and security provisions, but we need to have that on a maintenance schedule, as well as some additional IT. What we found from some of the dorms is we needed to increase the bandwidth. There's a lot of activity in those dorms on their computers. A little gaming going on too, just for the record. Next, you can see how our housing rates compare to various peers. Again, all of this is provided in advance. Same thing for Wise. Their current occupancy, again, is 99%. Please note their average occupancy for the 3 previous years was 82%. So a lot of work that has been done here, both in terms of increasing enrollment and doing some work to do some deferred maintenance. Next slide, you can just see the work that we did to compare, again, the housing average increase at Wise is 1.6%, benchmarked against the CPI rental, it's 5.2. Again, we consistently try to beat what we see in terms of the general rates, but also focus on maintaining affordability, but also making sure we have the reserves in place to maintain the assets. Here you can see UVA-wise relative to other selected institutions. And here are the housing rates proposed for WISE overall. Keep going, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next is student dining rates. Same sort of analysis goes on starting in fall. We look at sort of costs relative to personnel, maintenance and custodial costs associated with the current facilities, thinking about the expansion of student housing, and then the required capital and operating reserves. And then here, we also have to build in food costs, not only what's going on relative to food inflation, but also meeting the dietary needs of our diverse student body. So here, again, it's a self-supporting auxiliary operation. We have about 9,000 students at UVA that purchase dining contracts, and we have 3 all-access dining halls across grounds and 26 retail locations. I would say this year, the initial analysis suggested that we would need to raise rates closer to 8%. So we are really, with this proposal today at 5.5%, we're going to really need to do more work in evaluating existing utilization and financial performance, and probably doing some maybe shelving a couple of the locations or figuring out how to optimize them. So definitely restructuring and reconfiguration, and we'll be happy to bring that back if you're interested in how we're going to, we think we need closer to 6 or 7, and how we're going to get to the task of 5.5%. We have added additional costs relative to the enhanced service levels at Gaston and Ramazani houses. I'd encourage you all, when you have time to go see it, it is quite popular in our student body. And so we're really focused again on working on what do our students need and want, and then how do we do that most efficiently. Here are student dining rates. Again, dining rate average increase since 2018 is 4.3%. CPI food away from home has been consistently higher than that. So again, kudos to the UVA team led by Jaretta and Colette. They've done a lot of work to continue to control costs and to find ways to be efficient and effective. Here's peer institutions and how we benchmark. Next, you can see College of Wise as well. They are 100% self-supporting auxiliary operation. The rates here show how they are doing relative to their peers. Next slide. Their dining average increase since 2018 has been about 4.5%. And CPI, again, they're consistent at about 4.5%. Next, you can see WISE's contract meal plan rates. The rate increases are between 3.98 and 4.4, so the average overall is 4.2. So in summary, a lot of work's been done by many people, and again, really trying to balance out the quality of the programs, maintaining all of the law and policies, but also being as efficient as we can. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions?
Yeah, JJ, do you have any survey or other data that shows student satisfaction with the dining services?
We do. We have comprehensive work, and last year, I would say the quality's been uneven, and so we engaged a third party to come in and work with us, and we have a student working group under Jaretta's direction working on systematic improvements in some areas, and then also maintaining quality where quality is really high. So it's happy to share any or all of that. And there's a working group comprised of students and some faculty staff who use the dining services to give constant feedback.
So is that when you say uneven, that means some of the, we used to always drive to North Grounds because they had the only Michelin-starred dining hall when I was in school, but
Yeah,
at the law school, yeah.
Yeah, so what I would say is our students want different things. And so what we try to do is provide a range of options in terms of the food, the types of food, the experience. Some got 10 out of 10, and others got 7 and 8 out of 10. And so always trying to understand what's working well and where those areas of improvement are. And again, happy to come back and talk about that. We've spent a lot of time on this issue. The world is becoming more complex in terms of dining options, what people want, food allergies. It's a constant iterative process.
And I assume we have one provider for all of the dining services.
We do. We have a third-party relationship with Aramark.
Yeah.
And we have a different vendor at Wise.
And how locked in are we with Caremark?
Oh, it's a very lengthy contract. I have the details. I want to say it's 17 years in length.
And how far into that 17-year term are we?
It's 20, JJ, and we're halfway through the contract.
There you go. It's 20 years and we're halfway in. It predates me or Jim. But I will say we work regularly with them because it's a shared relationship to be successful or not successful.
Would there be any economies of scale if we were to use the same vendor for Wise and here?
We looked at that previously and it did not make sense, just given the physical distance between the two.
I'll just add to that we have actually bid the contract for food service at Wise and have not had any other takers. Chartwell's serves a lot of colleges in our region, and so that's been the best contract we can get.
I have a brief question. Just in terms of affordability, how is that directly factored into the decisions? Because I noticed that some of the rates are higher than others, so clearly there is a consideration, but I just wanted to know more specifically how the question of affordability is considered in these decisions.
Yeah, so a couple of things I would say, great question. What we look at is giving students optionality in terms of the dining plans. So we try to meet students with what their preferences are. So there's some that are comprehensive dining, there's some that are more limited, and then to tier that proportionally in terms of cost.
Other questions?
Yeah, one more question is, do you evaluate, or is there any way to evaluate how effectively or efficiently Caremark is operating its business and making sure that we're getting, sort of the best value as we think about these rate increases?
Yes.
And-
Again, we have a third party that comes in to help do an independent analysis working with us. Not only about how are we performing, but
Right, how
is our
Caremark
third-
is actually-
How Caremark is performing.
And what is this third party, what have the results shown?
The results have shown in some areas they hit it out of the park, 10 out of 10. In other areas, they're
You're talking about Caremark's running of their own business supply chain to get us the best value.
Correct. It's not only sort of the quality of the staff, it's the quality of the meal prep, it's the dining experience. Again, it's twofold. It also evaluated us in terms of we have obligations about maintaining the facilities, the type of equipment that we provide. So it's a shared relationship, and we have a third party that comes in and evaluates both and then gives us recommendations on how to improve.
Although I think what Paul is asking is, or do we have someone evaluating how efficiently they run their operation, which I'm assuming
Yes.
there's certain,
Yes.
you
Yes.
you sign a contract with somebody, you're not going to get to look at everything. But
But there are key benchmarks in
Okay.
the underlying contract, and they're held accountable and we're held accountable under that contract.
So if we approve this, the dining fees for students will increase by what, next year?
5.5% here at UVA on
Hou-
average.
Housing and,
Huh?
both housing and dining, right?
Yes.
Is that word?
Yes.
Okay.
John?
Hard assets, do we own stoves, things, or does Aramark?
It's an excellent question. So we own the underlying physical assets, and there are some equipment that we own and are required to maintain. Most of the large pieces of equipment are our responsibility.
It's unusual.
I know this is a 20-year contract, but are there kind of most favored nations provisions that ensure that we get the best of whatever they're offering any of our peer institutions?
Yes,
or do
and
we have
this,
that kind of-
yes, and if you go back and do an analysis of the underlying contract, UVA was very favored, and no one in the country has seen sort of the proposition that we got or the contract terms that we received. And we also have renegotiated during COVID. There was a pretty significant renegotiation with Aramark during COVID because, as you know, we sent our students home, or they didn't return after spring break. And so there was significant, plus the concessions in the stadiums. So there was a pretty significant renegotiation in 21 and 22.
Is it the case that they're able to push through certain cost to us, as, for example, food cost increased? Are they able to simply pass through that inflationary cost to us? Notwithstanding?
We negotiate all that. So we try to find true costs in the system, as well as, again, the pieces, it's not always lowest cost because we also want a level of quality, which we pay a premium for. So I hope I'm answering your question.
So I guess what I'm saying is that the driver of our increase is that we are covering the cost of the service, not that we are managing margins, so to speak.
Yes, yes. I think what we look at is what are the true costs, but we also often ask Aramark for not just, like, we want a diversification, we want certain standards within that has a premium to it that we spend a lot of time negotiating. Plus, we also spend a lot of time around the workforce.
So I think the common thread through these questions is, or one of them is, with a contract that's so long, do you feel like that Aramark has the proper incentives to provide the best quality at a fair price? Right, because the danger of a long contract is, you're locked in, then doesn't necessarily give you the best incentives.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. I think Aramark has been a good partner. It has at times, like all things, been uneven, which is why a year ago we decided to bring in a third party, both to sort of reflect on what's UVA's role and should it be doing things differently or better, and also with Aramark. And then that has been a facilitated conversation between Aramark, UVA, and a third party independent. So the short answer is yes.
And there are enough tools in the contract to make Aramark responsive.
Yes.
Other questions? Okay, if committee members do not object, I would propose that we take up the resolutions on faculty housing, on student housing, and on dining, all at Charlottesville and Wise together. Those resolutions are pages 6 to 7, 9 to 10, and 12 to 13 of the finance.
Mr. Chairman, I request they be separated.
Fair enough. Okay, so let's start then with faculty housing, which is pages 6 to 7 of the Finance Committee book. There is a resolution. Is there a motion to approve it?
Motion.
There's a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Pages 9 to 10, student housing in the Finance Committee book. Are there questions? Is there a motion to approve that?
Moved.
The motion, is there a second? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay. And then on pages 12 to 13 is dining rates. Any further questions or discussion there? Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Got it. All right, on we go to major capital projects.
Great. So as we spoke yesterday, the Buildings and Grounds Committee, as you know, determines whether a project should be added to the major capital projects program, and the Finance Committee is evaluating whether there's a sound financial plan to pay for the estimated project costs and additional operating costs that are expected once the project is complete. My office and I have the responsibility to confirm that appropriate funding is in place before any project commences construction. We have 2 capital project financial plans for your consideration. First is the North Grounds Parking Garage. As we said, the B&G committee yesterday discussed and approved the design of the new parking garage at North Grounds. The estimated total project cost is $50 million. It'll be funded by debt of $24.6 million, institutional funds of $18.2 million, and parking and transportation reserves at $7.2. Parking is also an auxiliary and needs to be fully self-contained. There's no state funds that go to that. Of the amount funded by debt, $19.7 million will be serviced by parking revenues and $4.9 million will be serviced from university bond proceeds. The second item for your consideration is the Ivy Corridor student housing. Colette spoke eloquently yesterday. We anticipate the 3-building facility of approximately 750 to 800 beds in apartment-style housing, as well as dining, programmatic, and retail spaces. The estimated total project budget is between 150 and 160 million. It will be funded by debt serviced by housing and dining revenues. Please note that the Ivy Corridor student housing is ultimately accretive to the bottom line, and this is something that we did spend some time talking with the rating agencies about. They have been hearing the need for additional undergraduate student housing, and we're quite excited to learn that we will be moving this forward. So really quickly, Colette shared yesterday the work that's going on here. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time. We had external assistance from Brailsford Dunleavy, and we also had a pan-university team, Margot Rogers, Colette Sheehy, and then a cross-section of people, Kenyon Bonner's team, Student Affairs, so making sure the program that we design and develop meets students' needs, right? Important that we had a cross-section of people to really build what students wanted to see for the future. This, as I said, this building project entails 3 separate buildings, approximately 150 to 160 million. We will not have a final number yet because it is still going through design iteration, which you heard yesterday. We estimate housing rates as a result of this expansion and the issuance of debt will increase between 5 and 5.5% for the next several years, because obviously a lot of new stock in the contained system will require that growth. Our rates are very competitive, as we spent a lot of time with David Webb in the past couple of months on this. And I think Colette spent some time yesterday explaining the why and why this is so attractive, the 9 months, and balancing out the affordability and then also high quality. I'm going to go, I probably need an approval there, and then we'll go into the general obligation bonds.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
You weren't here yesterday when I raised the question about parking for the 800 beds in this new building, and I wasn't quite satisfied with the answer. I asked if the new parking deck was going to accommodate cars for all of the residents, and the answer was no, but I never got an answer how many were going to be accommodated in the new deck and where the others who aren't going to be accommodated will park.
Yeah, so not all of the second years bring cars, right? So we're still working through the analysis about how restrictive will we need this parking garage to be. We have, as Colette mentioned yesterday, we are decamping the current garage because it will basically need to handle the new guest house. So some of the cars will go over there. So the primary use of this North Grounds parking garage will be for commuters, our employees, and event parking. There will be potentially some student reserved spaces, but at this time, we don't have a fine number. We will be working on that in the coming months, but it is not a one-for-one. Not every student living in this housing will have a one-for-one correlation for parking. That's not,
Let's say 600 of them bring cars. Where are we going to allow parking for those 600? 3/4.
we have not made the determination that we will allow all 600 students to bring cars. We are still working through what's the appropriate policy for second years and the use of parking.
That we want to encourage our students to come the second year, but we're putting restrictions on why we would encourage them if they can't bring their own car.
It might be
We don't-
useful to understand the current context.
Exactly.
Because
What's
we-
the-
Like Gaston and Ramazani.
Yeah,
Is
there's
there
no parking.
There's no parking.
Or Lambeth.
Yeah,
And is there demand to live in Gaston and
Yes.
Ramazani and Lambert?
yes.
Where do they park?
Most of them don't bring cars.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I would also add that I know my kids and others who live around 13th and 14th Street. usually they get a house they rent in this one space, and so the others, they just have to make do. And so they look around, they find something, they really need it to get home, maybe get an occasional trip to the grocery store. So it is a sort of a common thing I think they're used to dealing with.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually note that my son does not want to have a car here. It's too much work, and there's not enough parking. Even if you had a parking spot, there's nowhere else to park closer to grounds anyway. So I'm not as concerned about whether there's for second years. I mean, I don't know, Lisa, you might have a view, but my sense is that parking is so limited on grounds that even if you had a car, you're not able to use it but for sitting next to your apartment.
And we have a great, I guess I would also say, we have a great transportation system, a local bus system that does go down. You can, because when I lived in Muse, the first year I worked here, I actually took the bus down to Barracks Road to get my groceries. So we have a really nice, and you can walk it too, so.
Is JPJ Garage on non-event days, is that available for daily parking?
It's JPJ, yes, JPJ is available for daily, but we do close it for big events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just affirming that most second years, I don't think the expectation is that most second years have cars. And also, especially when you live on grounds, I don't think there's an expectation that you have a car. Most students don't.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do you anticipate, JJ, the VAF will sell parking spaces in the new parking lot for basketball, men's basketball in particular, and potentially other sports?
Yeah, so we're in those discussions now. We've not finalized anything, but there are discussions about that. Because it is one of the main drivers of that North Grounds garage is for event parking.
Sure. I don't understand, as a faculty member, the relationship. Like, is that monies that they raise only go to them, or will they have a hand in financing this? Like, how does that work? I don't know.
Yeah, I'd like to take that offline. We're still working through the parking garage. But again, we run the parking and transportation primarily.
Got it. My other, thanks for that. My other point is, and it's not wholly germane to this, is parking is absolutely the number one gripe of faculty and staff. And your points, Dr. Long, about students and where they're going to park, I get. But the people who work here can't. They can find places, but they're often quite far, quite expensive. So I get that we need more, but paying for it, it sounded like via the fees that we're charging our employees to work here, is a major pain point. And I hope the board at some point could explore some of that with some creative options.
Other questions, comments? Hearing none, there is a resolution on page 15 of the Finance Committee book to approve the financial plans for these two capital projects. Is there a motion to approve that resolution? We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Very good.
Okay, next up, we're going to talk about the pre-authorization that we're requesting of the board for the issuance of general revenue pledge bonds, specifically related to the housing expansion that was just approved. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm going to get right to the heart of it. There's some background material about the financial market updates. Obviously, the markets continue to express volatility. We have been the envy of the country and previously authorized and executed debt sales. I give a lot of credit to former board members and the Treasury team led by Julie at UVA and our partners. So this pre-authorization is one of the ways it has allowed us in the past to be nimble, to take advantage of market opportunities, because it doesn't always work in the cadence of the board meetings. So what we are asking for you today is a pre-authorization for a future debt issuance, and it's often called in the market a debt shelf. As I said, the past two debt shelves not only set up UVA to access the market quickly, but it also permitted us to work with our investment banks, monitoring supply and demand, and enter the market at the most opportunistic time. Here are the results of the previous debt shelf authorizations. And the 2021 was record-setting for both yield and spreads. There's a great article in Bond Buyer in the Wall Street Journal, which they're both hanging in our offices these days. So I can't guarantee that we will have a record-setting rate again, but we will do our best to be as competitive as possible. The work of the previous debt shelf authorizations have allowed us to decrease rates and increase the average life. The average life is now 38 years of our debt, which includes 2 century bond issuances. As you know, we were able to issue 100-year money for 3.26%. And again, just kudos to former board members, John Griffin and Jim Murray in particular were quite helpful in working with the board to give us this new tool in our toolbox, the pre-authorization. So at this time, we are asking for your approval for a debt shelf authorization of up to $200 million over a 4-year period. Again, we are going to take the long game and really think about when to go into the market. As always, before any debt is approved, there is a very, very robust process that underpins it. We will have to go back and talk with each of the rating agencies and do a full-blown analysis. And we will come back and work with the finance chair. In fact, the finance chair is often with us when we go and meet with investors. We are asking for multiple modes to be permitted, a fixed or variable, various durations and structures, as we're just not sure what the markets will look like in the next 4 years. So try to put guardrails into the resolution so as to give me some flexibility, but obviously we won't go unless it's advantageous to the overall portfolio and to UVA. With that, I'll take any questions.
David.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a general comment about borrowing as an institution, and for some of you, this may be very boring, but I'm going to say it anyway. So rates, as you all know, have gone up enormously. And if you look back over 150 years, I watch the 10-year Treasury 10 times a day. So I do, and I've traced the history and I've read reports on this. So over 150 years, there's a very predictable cycle for the long-term rates. And the cycles usually run 20 to 30 years. The longest cycle we've had in 150 years was the 82 to 22 cycle where it was down. And that's why rates got so low. And anybody can make money by borrowing at 3% and investing higher than that, right? So you had a combination of good returns in the markets plus that. I mean, we're in an era now where most people predict it's, who knows, 20 to 40 years. You just really don't know of increasing rates. We're already somewhat into that, but it's not a straight line. It's up and down. So I do think being opportunistic is important and being ready to pull the trigger when they dip, because they don't stay down for long when they do. But also I think we should think, and this isn't just applying to this situation, we should think hard about borrowing and the level of borrowing. So borrowing 100% of cost before is like borrowing 75% of cost today. So if there's a way going forward to put more equity in these things, we basically have the same sort of borrowing cost on a project. I think the garage and the apartments are a little bit different because they're revenue producing and they can cover. They don't cover at 6%, which is the upper end of the authorization. And I told JJ this, but she assures me that she won't borrow at 6%. But I do think we should all be very mindful of borrowing today. It's not like it used to be. And it's not going to be for a while. I think it's going to be an upward trend up and down.
Yeah.
So just for the record.
Yeah, we would really appreciate the ability to do, again, there will be times in the market where it goes down and there's not a lot of people in the market. So this debt shelf does allow us to be opportunistic.
I know we're short on time, but I have one quick question. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Yesterday we talked about the art center and how we were going to get the General Assembly and there's a big gift, and then projects like this, we're basically doing 100% debt. How do we make decisions like that of whether we're going to go with a debt approach or we're going to wait for the gifts, or I mean, how do you just What's the Reader's Digest explanation for kind of how we think about that when we're financing a big project?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we work as a team in management to look at all of the ways we could finance projects and the pros and cons of that. And then we make recommendations up to Jim and the leadership team. And we have robust discussions about both prioritization, right? Because there are many more projects and ideas and really great ideas and resources available. And then to really strategically think about what is the best use of debt relative, is there a gift available relative to Commonwealth funding? What do they like to fund versus what would they not fund, for example? And so it's a pretty detailed analysis, and it's also iterative.
And so it's sort of case by case. There's not like a policy or something like that. It's just, you look at the project and where is it in the priorities and what's it looking like right now and that type of thing.
I mean, I would say one rule of thumb is we're more likely to use debt if there's a revenue stream to pay off the debt service.
Makes sense.
And I also think we're underpinned by the 2030 plan. We put a lot of energy and time into what do we want to accomplish for the university over the next decade. So that's also there's a roadmap. It's not just a helter-skelter, there's a pretty methodical process that underpins all the work that we've done to date.
I would just note that Jim's point is a good one, which is to the extent you're using debt because it's underpinning a revenue generating, it puts a lot of emphasis on your 6%, right? And so I would just say, and I'd reiterate what David said, I hope we're not issuing debt at 6% because that's not going to work. So if you need the latitude on any given day, and I'd also ask that you come back to the board when you do the opportunistic things to tell the board what you've done. Make sure we're all comfortable as you proceed down the drawdowns on the shelf over 4 years, that we all understand when it's happening, why it's happening. I think it will be helpful to kind of bring people along.
And that's been standard practice.
Yes.
All right,
Well, we'd like to say, to their credit, we do have the 2 lowest debt offerings in the history of higher education, so they do.
No pressure, JJ. No pressure. Yeah.
They do not like to issue debt at very high rates.
and for 100 years.
And for 100 years. So, yeah.
Okay. Other questions or comments on this? There is a resolution on pages 16 to 18 of the Finance Committee book. Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, on to the Strategic Investment Fund.
Great, thank you very much. So we spent a lot of time on this at the November orientation session and previously at the September board meeting. As you know, I think this has been absolutely one of UVA's distinguishing advantages, both financially and then the ability to use strategic investment funds to match philanthropic dollars. So to date, there's been $1 billion committed since 2016, and just in the philanthropic matching of professorships and scholarships, in total, about $500 million of SIF funds has leveraged another $700 million of match. So $1.2 billion has been a crowning success as a result of the Strategic Investment Fund. Here's the long-term timeline. Since September and then again in November, management went to work in terms of really trying to continue to refine the strategic investment program, both in terms of governance, oversight. Specifically, the recommendations that we put forth are to provide additional consultation with respect to the president, with the rector and the finance chair, both on sort of what is in the queue. As you know, this tool has been exceptionally important for Jim, both in terms of the strategic plan, like what are we using it for, and then 2, to be opportunistic in working with very large philanthropic donors to UVA. We've also tightened up the spending discipline of the fund. So you can see we previously had the endowment spending policy, but as we have discussed, some of those accounts can be drawn down. So we have added a discount factor to make the overall program more conservative. And while we do a lot of robust monitoring and reporting internally to UVA, we have added an audit. I know there's a lot of interest in this, so I think at this point, Chairman, I think we should.
Yeah, I know a lot of committee members have questions, comments. I'm wondering if there's anything you want to say to start off with, or we'll just open it up for what our committee members want to.
I think it would be useful to hear
Fair enough.
from the committee members first.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I think this has been a very successful program. The projects are exciting. The philanthropy in particular that it's stimulated has really changed UVA for the positive. I do think, however, that the Board of Visitors should review and approve all projects that are spent under the SIF. It's extremely big dollar stuff. I mean, since 2020, it's been, I think, almost $500 million in projects on the table. I think we've got another 9 figures of planning that we're doing for the SIF. And I just think that an essential role for the Board of Visitors is to monitor, review, and approve money like that that's being spent on behalf of the university. I mean, I think as I look at the projects that we've done, the overwhelming majority of them are ones that would get unanimous approval from the board. I suspect that that would continue, but I'm going to make a motion during this committee that we add a board review and approval step at the end of the process that we already have for SIF projects.
So I'm wondering, Doug, very fair point. Is there a level, though, below which because when this process started, the board was approving, as I understand it, every project, and it does get a little bogged down. For example, we don't approve contracts that the university enters into below a certain level. I'm just wondering if there's a sort of a number above which the board has to approve, but below which, besides in the aggregate, we would be approving that you would think would make sense.
Well, I mean, I'd be interested in discussion about that, but it doesn't seem to me like we have that many SIF projects. And I think what you're talking about with contracts is, I mean, I assume that's stuff that's in the approved budget that the board reviews and approves.
Absolutely.
So in my mind, it's a great program. The projects are exciting. I think the board needs to be closer to it. And my hope would be that we could even help with ideas and consultation and collaboration that would make the program even more successful than it already is. But I don't understand why the SIF program is unlike all the other stuff that we do, where the board has clear statutory obligations to review spending like this. And I mean, I analogize it in my head to some of the things that we review and approve at every meeting, like new professorships like we did yesterday, the endowed ones, faculty promotions and hires. I mean, that's obviously core work of the administration, but we have a statutory role to play to review and approve. So, I mean, I'm interested in a discussion about that, but given the limited number of projects that we have, I just don't understand why we can't have those presented to the board. I think, an overwhelming majority of them are going to be moments of intense celebration for everybody on the board. And if board members have questions, I think it's good governance and it's good institutional discipline to have that step included in the process, especially when you're talking about this level of investment.
Mr. Chairman, I was on the committee when we put this into place in 2014, and that was one of the things that we absolutely insisted on, that the board have thorough review. I'm not aware of why subsequent boards changed that. We also looked at the number of these requests, but we felt that it was our fiduciary responsibility, as well as Doug pointed out, the opportunity for us to become even more engaged in the SIF and perhaps either recruit donors and or develop programs that we thought were SIF worthy. So I would support Doug. To your point, however, I think maybe there's some rational number above which we look at, just as we do with the health system. There's a certain number beyond which the board has to grant approval, but I would agree with Doug.
Mr. Chairman, so I was thinking too, below a certain number, you could have an expedited approval, much like when Ian read off the list yesterday of professorships and so forth, where it's simply read off at a meeting. And if anybody has a problem, they can raise it for discussion. Otherwise, it's just deemed approved below a certain number. So there's an expedited approval for, I would assume we're talking about smaller ones, whatever that level is, as a way to not bog down any process. And I will say one other comment aside from the governance and checks and balances that I think are important. I do think that, I also commend Jim and past boards and JJ and everybody for all the work on the SIF. I mean, it was great to hear about the venture capital yesterday. You know, that was fun. So this is not personal at all. It's just about governance and the role of the board. But the other point I would make is, you mentioned protect corpus, and I think what's sacrosanct is not just the corpus, but the inflation-adjusted corpus. And I've talked to JJ about, can we track? I would love to know, so we shouldn't, generally speaking, on any sort of endowment, you shouldn't be dipping into the principal or the inflation-adjusted principal, and you usually are taking some portion, a majority of that above inflation. I'd love to see where, I know this takes time, but I'd love to see where we are, where the balance is versus where it would have been with just inflationary increases. That would be helpful for me to know. Are we ahead of the game? Are we underwater? I have no idea. And, so it'd be nice to track that. It would impact, I think, the size of the gifts, but I think that generally speaking, I would say the draw percentages I've seen sound reasonable, but it was kind of crazy for a while. I mean, I fully admit what I've seen, and I've done a lot of reading and talking to past rectors and board members from these years because I was trying to understand this. From what I've seen, it kind of went a little out of control for a while, and I think they probably spent more than they should have. I don't know that for sure, but in the words of one board member who's a finance expert, we had some great years, but we're also very likely to have a lot of down years, like literally negative, not just not much positive. And so I'm talking about the Eventco returns. So we have to be prepared for that. So,
Interestingly, it was out of control when the board was more involved.
That's exactly right.
That may just be purely coincidence. I'm just offering
I
that up
think
as
that-
a historical fact.
I think
Why was that? I mean, why? I'm sorry for interrupting.
it doesn't seem like there's anybody checking the spending.
JJ has, in my estimation, JJ has done a really good job of maintaining discipline in this.
I would say the first 3 years of this program were the times when they were out of control, when the board had oversight and was making individual decisions on individual grants. And also understand that in recruiting a president of his ilk, that one of the selling points was this strategic investment fund, which was a novel idea that no university had thought of before. So that was one of the, I'm sure, very enticing things for Jim to think that if we could come and as a board develop a strategic plan and going forward, we would be able to give the president and development the opportunity to go out and present to donors the opportunity to have matching. Before the SIF, we could not raise money for Access UVA. We raised $5 million over a period of like 10 years. And you heard last night, John Castine put that up as a goal early in his tenure, and it went nowhere. Well, once we established the SIF and Access UVA and were able to match gifts, JJ just told you, $700 million, $500 million, $1.2 billion. So in
Just in
19
those two programs.
in those two programs, when it was changed in 2019 to give more autonomy to the president and to development to use funds for the strategic plan, then it took off. Also, we are approving the expenditures. They're asking of us to have the authority over the next 3 years to spend $65 million a year. This board will approve that. So it's not like we don't have a role in this. We do have a role in this. We're giving them the flexibility within the confines of that $65 million to go out and talk to major donors and say, would you consider making a $20 million gift or a $50 million gift if we'll match it 50 cents on the dollar, 100 cents on the dollar? Now, if you think, I think that's perfectly fair within the confines and the structure of where the president brings it back to the finance chair and to the rector. And if we want to involve a few other members, I think that would be appropriate too. But at the same time, this is a wildly successful project, wildly successful. So my question is, what problem are we trying to solve?
Robert, can you define, can you define, not a hostile
Hey,
question?
Steve,
Oh.
we got a couple
what is out of
members of the
control?
committee.
You've used it,
A couple
Robert's
members
used
of the
it.
committee who are interested
We
in talking.
overspent.
And we have the
The SIF
president of the
overspent in the
university.
first
So
3 years.
let's go to Doug and Paul, and then
Okay.
Jim. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I guess the point I would make is no one is suggesting we get rid of the SIF. It's a wonderful program. No one is suggesting for 1 minute that we don't use it to match gifts, to generate philanthropy. And in my mind, I don't know what it was like with the prior board was involved. I think you mentioned that they got involved in individual grant decisions, and maybe that's how it got out of control. In my mind, the program would be administered, run, operated almost exactly the way it is now with our ACE team that we, pay to do work like this, and they do a fantastic job, and they're worth every penny. It would just be that the board has a governance role to play here. It's not an unreasonable thing, in my opinion. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for the board, once a quarter when we meet, to look at the projects, review them, ask questions if we have them when we get our board books, and vote on them. I think that that's all I'm talking about. I don't know if we're talking about anything beyond that, but I just think I think we have a duty. I don't think I think when you're talking about this kind of money, I think it's one of our core responsibilities as a board is to look at significant expenditures of public money and make sure, as the people who sent us here, that we're comfortable with it, that we approve of it. And I suspect, again, I'll say it one more time, I suspect that it'll be just like we do with almost everything we do around here that requires board approval. It'll be overwhelming majority approval of an overwhelming majority of the projects.
Paul, then Rachel, sorry, and then we'll go to the president.
So I want to associate myself with Doug's comments. I don't think anyone is questioning the worthiness of SIF. I think it's worked really well. I don't think this board, however, should be tied to whatever governance perspective a previous board may have had. So if a previous board had a different governance perspective of their role vis-a-vis SIF, this board shouldn't be wedded to that. But I would like to know, has the number of SIF projects increased over the years, versus when it started? What is the average number of projects? And is the issue that we don't have enough time during board meetings to sort of sort through these projects and make some decisions? Because I think there is ample room in board meetings as currently constituted to find room in board meetings to have real conversation about these SIF projects. So how many SIF projects on average are there? And has that number increased over the years?
So since inception, there have been 78 awards made, SIF awards. The distinguishing change in 2019 was that there was alignment from the board and the administration that the funds would be really used in support of the strategic plan and to cultivate large philanthropic gifts around professorships, scholarships, and the third issue being research. So there have been less awards, but larger and way more strategic, all aligned with a comprehensive financial plan underpinning the strategic plan.
So 78 total over the years.
Yes, 78 total grants since 2016.
Okay, so we're talking what, like 10 a year or something along that lines?
It varies,
Okay.
but yes.
2.5 for board meetings.
My question was just coming back to something that you said, and I think Mr. Long, you alluded to. I mean, there is probably a dollar amount under which we are not interested in, or it would not be a good use of the board's time to be fully invested. But I guess my question is, to your point, when you pivoted to large transformational things, how many gifts really are there below $5 million? And how are those large and transformational? If they're not, then, I mean, we're spending a lot of time talking about very good governance things here, but what we're really focused on is large transformational gifts, which is what we have all been excited about and what we're all interested in approving. Then, I don't know that there's as much debate that we need to be having here. I don't have a sense of how many smaller gifts there are, but other than looking at what's been on the website.
If you don't mind, Porter, let's let Jim jump in here.
So let me just, give some background and then address some of the questions and then propose something that might be a way forward. You heard some of the background, but I think a key piece of this worth emphasizing is when the changes were made to SIF, it really tied SIF to the strategic plan. And that wasn't happening before. So it was more of a bottom-up process. It was basically a call for proposals. A faculty committee went through them, and then the board voted on the recommendations from the faculty committee. There were worthwhile projects that were funded, but there was no strategy. It was just a bottom-up process. The basic architecture of SIF now is the board has authorized us to invest SIF with respect to the strategic plan. So you could debate about whether that satisfies your fiduciary duty or not, but I think it's at least debatable. That is to say, it's not a blank check. And then there's a process afterwards to see if we have actually spent in accordance with the strategic plan. And it is a lot of money, for sure, but it's 2 to 3% of our budget every year. So I don't think you would be failing in your fiduciary duty to say, we authorize you to spend 2 to 3% of the budget on the strategic plan. That said, I completely appreciate the desire to have a little bit more input, and I'm not opposed to it. Two things that I know would be really useful right now is to get your approval of continuing to have SIF funding available for matches for scholarships and for professorships, because we're in the last phase of the campaign and some of those funds need to be replenished. And I would like to keep the same rules we've had, but just know that if we need to replenish them before the end of the campaign, we can. I don't think we can wait till March, in other words, to come back here and get approval for that. That's number one. Number two, the other piece of this that has been incredibly valuable is I have had the ability to put in matching funds for very large gifts. So that helps secure the gift from the Karshes. That helps secure the gift from Paul Manning. And I would like to have your approval to be able to continue to do that. And some of those are time sensitive. So if you're in the midst of a negotiation with someone and you say, hold on for I don't know how long, and I can't tell you whether there's going to be a match, that gift might disappear. I don't use it frequently. You're going to hear about another gift later today where I did use it, and I think it's one that you'll be pleased by. But if we could lead, and then I think we could table the conversation about whether there should be a limit below which we don't need to get pre-authorization. You're right, that doesn't happen very often anymore because we're making fewer but bigger bets. But it does happen on occasion. So we are seeding research funding. That's a pretty low grant. So there might be some instances where you might want to say, yeah, anything under $5 million you're authorized to do, but anything over $5 million, I mean, that benchmark is just top of mind because of what we need to get for contract authorization. There won't be much, to your point, under 5 million because we've kind of walked away from making a lot of small bets to making bigger bets. But the two time-sensitive things are being able to, we still have some funds available for scholarships. The funds available for matching professorships is gone. And I would love for us to try to secure a few more university professorships, which have been more successful than I thought they were going to be. And I think we have 10. I think we could get to 15 by the end of the campaign. And I think that would be a huge plus to the university. But then also having, and it could be, you could put a dollar limit on it to say no more than $25 million for a particular gift. That has to be at least $50 million. It's fine by me, but having that authorization to be in a negotiation, to be able to know that we can offer matching gifts in order to secure a very large gift is crucial. And that's time sensitive. So that would be my suggestion.
So maybe just to rephrase, so you're asking for approval for 65 million to extend the ability to do professors and professor matching right now exclusively.
Professor matching, scholarship
Scholarship.
matching,
And large
and then a
donor.
large
Large
donor.
donor
Okay,
matching.
so just to clarify, so that's the ask, 1 year, 65 million to do those things. I just want to clarify what the ask is on the table. And then just ask a question, because, I mean, I spent a lot of time negotiating things, and it's not usually the case where you're in a meeting and you have to say, oh, well, this is the first instance that we have to offer a match. You go into the meeting with a plan, right? You don't sit down with Paul Manning without an idea of what you're going to ask him for and what he might need in response to that. So I'm very sympathetic, and I want you to have the latitude to continue to do the great things. But honestly speaking, you could have previewed that need, that meeting gets scheduled. You could have a conversation with someone on the board, on the finance committee in advance saying, I'm meeting with John now, and I would like him to give us $20 million, and I'd like to match that. I want to make sure you're okay with that. I don't think that's a big ask. It's a phone call. It provides a fair amount of governance comfort, but I mean, maybe I'm wrong, because I don't sit in these meetings, and you can tell me it's spontaneous and the need to ask it is more spontaneous.
Yeah.
It's not meant to hamstring you. It is
Yeah.
meant to actually buttress you when you walk into that meeting saying, the board has fully approved our ability to match this, and I want to do it.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I would say in some instances you can anticipate it, in other instances you can't. But I don't think it would be too much of a hindrance if I could check in with the rector and the chair of the finance to say, I'm going into this conversation and I'd like you to approve my ability to offer a match up to a certain level. I don't think that would hamper it. But the longer the delay, the more you increase that it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Okay, Porter and then Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I realize that I'm not a member of this committee, but from a governance perspective, I wanted to associate my comments with all of my colleagues who feel like we do need more oversight. But I think that the president and Ms. Sheridan have just hit on a really important aspect, which is that transparency and consultation in these instances can almost provide more oversight than actually having ultimate approval authority. So I think if we could have increased consultation, and maybe semi-annually is not sufficient enough if time is of the essence, as you say. But if we have quarterly consultation where the board is intimately aware of everything that's going down, then I think that adds a lot of oversight with ultimate approval authority. So I think what you all just landed on is probably a workable system.
Mr. Chairman, I will say that I spoke to a couple donors who have given to us, one of whom I'll let speak for himself, but I asked a simple question. If you were looking for matching funds or willing to do something with matching funds, and someone said to you, yeah, I'd love to do this deal, we'll get the matching funds, of course, I just need to get board approval. And they both said, of course, one who is on a major university board said, yeah, I would expect that, I'm on a board and I would expect board approval, so that wouldn't bother us if the only delay was to get board approval. And, because these things generally, particularly if they're larger, take a long time. So the flip-flop of what you're saying, Rachel, yes, you can get pre-approval, or you can get the gift and just say, and you could have a discussion with a rector or a vice rector before you, or treasury, finance chair, before you go into the meeting. But I also think you just tell the person, matching contingent on board approval. Most people think that's perfunctory. And I just don't think it's a big hindrance.
Mr. Chair. Yeah. I'm not a part of this committee either, but I've listened to lots and lots of people on this topic. I've also read the board book, and I just wonder if there isn't already alignment in this, because if you read the resolution, but then you read the appendix contains the principles of everything that everyone is raising, but the language doesn't translate from the appendix into the resolution. And the appendix outlines that if you're going to spend more than $5 million a year or $15 million in aggregate over 3 years, that should be endorsed by the board, which dovetails exactly with what's the level below which, and dovetails exactly which at the medical center it has to go above 5 million. It only when it goes above 5 million does it require approval. So, I mean, is everybody actually on the same page?
and it's just a matter of language that exists in the resolution.
Well, if everyone's on the same page, we've wasted 20 minutes. So, no, look, I think there are, it strikes me we've got a longer discussion to have on broader governance and potentially a shorter term with what Jim just proposed that Rachel, I think, outlined. And so I think the question for the committee is, are we comfortable taking up the suggestion that Rachel just made to sort of get us through the next few months, and then we come back with the longer term governance? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, just to be clear, I think we talked about two things. So one was the approval for the 65 million for the
Right.
year. And then the other was the pre-approval issue. I'm not sure we have alignment on that, but the 65 million to get us through March, because you need to do what you need to do, focused exclusively on scholarships, transformative things. I think that's on the table, and I think we should.
And I guess the question for the committee, maybe particularly for you, David, since you raised it, is, between now and March, are you okay with consultation with the chair of the finance committee and the rector, as opposed to the end, sort of saying, wait, I need to get full board
Just till
approval?
March, and then what about the approval amount? What are we saying there? 65 million or?
Well, I think we're authorizing 65 million.
The resolution technically says 195.
Right, but we understand,
65 over
we're
3
editing
That's 3 years.
we're editing the resolution.
Talking about
It's
1 year.
1 year. It is for matching for scholarships and professorships. And any grant made under that Jim would need to consult with the rector and the chair of the finance committee.
And then return at the next board meeting to the broader issue.
We will
Correct,
have a.
precisely.
I can give you some language. I've been working on some language for amendment if you'd like.
I think we should go write it and bring it to the full board.
Yeah, so that's the alternative, right? Susan, we could write it and then take it to the full board, assuming the concept is acceptable to the committee. But maybe it's not, I don't know. So we'll have to find that out.
Mr. Chair, you're one of the members, I think Mr. Wetmore
Yeah.
had a possible resolution that you were talking about
No,
introducing.
I mean, I just have my points. I mean, I like a way forward, which I guess is what's being suggested, but I guess it's, to me, this is a pretty fundamental principle of board governance. It's unclear to me why we have to, I mean, no one wants to hamstring, no one wants to slow down, no one wants to, get in the way. I can't, it's hard for me to picture in my mind's eye a professorship or a scholarship that the board wouldn't approve lickety-split, and if it's urgent, we could, I guess in theory, have a special meeting or something like that that's on video. I just don't, I guess, I don't know, we had a lot of preparation. We talked about this in November. We talked about it at the last board meeting, and then it was docketed to be discussed at this board meeting. I don't know, and I guess we've had about 25 minutes to do so. I don't know why we would push the big question off until the next board meeting, and what's going to change between now and then that's different from what happened between the September meeting and this meeting.
Yeah, so under the regime that we're discussing, I'd like to know, is it the chair's practice to get a general sense of the committee, the finance committee, or a reasonable attempt to get a general sense of the finance committee before making
Chair
a
doesn't
decision?
have a practice on this because we haven't done it this way before. But I would be more than happy to say, of course, I would be interested in getting a general sense of the committee.
Before decision is made?
Yeah.
Okay,
Sure.
great.
But it does seem that isn't there unanimity that if Jim has the ability to use SIF funds for scholarship, professorship, or to entice large donors to make transformative gifts, he should have that latitude,
But
up to $65 million for the
In
next year.
consultation with.
Consultation with you and me.
Well, that was for the next 3 months, I thought.
Correct,
Yeah.
But it's for funds that he could allocate over that period of time, right?
correct.
That he can move on.
I think pretty much through the end of the campaign, which is when?
July.
July.
Well, we're going to be back together in March. I think we can certainly discuss this further then. The question is,
Yeah, I think.
are you
I think
comfortable with
there's a lot
that?
of due diligence by Morris too, we like to do in addition, so.
Fair enough. So let me ask again, is there a, or maybe we just vote on the concept as described and then write it up, and it'll be, the text will be in front of the full board this afternoon.
I mean, I'd ask for a second and a vote on my motion to require all SIF awards to have Board of Visitors approval in advance.
Oh, we have a-
If
so we
that's
have a
defeated-
motion.
If that's, if
A
there's,
second.
if there's a second, if
We
there's
have
not
a
a
mo-
second.
we have a motion
And if it's
on-
defeated, I guess we can go to
We have to
something
approve
else.
the motion
Fair enough. So we would.
to walk it on.
Correct. So it would require two votes. First is a vote to consider it, and the second would be actually a vote in favor of it. Do I have that correct, Susan? Because it's a walk-on resolution.
Supermajority to consider it and a majority to vote in favor of it.
And we'd need that for anything other than what was in the board book. So any of these different permutations and combinations would require a supermajority to consider in the first place. And then if it passes that test, then it would be a majority vote up or down.
Yep.
Is that how it works? Okay.
Is that right? I mean, amending
And this is the
walk-on motion,
committee
it needs a
meeting, so it's
supermajority
only
to
the
be
committee
approved to be
members.
I understand. I got it.
Because it's not
So
on the agenda, so it has to supermajority.
first we have
It has to pass by
a,
majority.
right, okay,
committee.
we have a motion and a second to consider. I'll treat your motion as a motion to consider the walk-on resolution. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
You're not.
You're not-
you
Only
only
members of the committee. It's very confusing, understandably.
Consider
so.
my motion and we
Right.
agree to that if it passes.
Okay, all opposed, no? No. I do not believe there is a supermajority.
Roll call.
That's fine, let's do a roll call. Susan, you want to call the roll?
Sorry, I'm confused. What
Right.
is it that we are?
We are voting on whether to consider Doug's motion to require the, no, right now, to require board approval of every SIF grant. Is that correct?
Yes.
I just have a question. You know, from a donor's perspective, it has to be quick. I mean, we have to, how this is done has to be fast, because when you're sitting in a meeting with Mark Llewellyn and he's pushing you, so however we approve these, especially for me as a donor, and I agree that governance is necessary, but you can't wait 3 months for the next board meeting to approve. So I'd like to know some of the details of how that would be done. Just in your opinion, how would that approval happen?
We have an executive committee.
So
Exactly.
can you give more details?
Well, I guess it's a fair question, I suppose. I mean, I think we have bylaws that talk about how we have meetings to approve anything around here, including major capital expenditures. We could call a special meeting of the board, which takes a couple of days. We have meetings every quarter, as you know, Paul. And I mean, I don't mean to be, I know we're just up against time. I mean, my memory of the Manning Institute project, and I mean, I'm sitting next to the man himself, so I'm going to be careful, was that unfolded over a long period of time. The General Assembly was involved, and that was part of it. No?
No,
Okay.
that was after it. We met on it with Jim.
But I mean, was it shorter than 5 days? I mean,
No, I'm not sure of the 5 days,
I
but it was
mean-
in that time. I'm not talking
Right.
about 3 months. I'm
Right.
just trying to get some details of how a special committee, to have a $50 million or $100 million diff, how quickly would you get back to the donor and how would you get back? That's just my question.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm not a member of this committee, but as the chairman of the Advancement Committee, I'd just like to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we're doing superbly now, the way we're progressing. And what I'm hearing is that we're going to put some impediments in a system that may make it more challenging to do all that we can possibly do from an advancement point of view. So I would just ask you all to think about that as you consider the matters before you. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table to consider a walk-on resolution proposed by Mr. Wetmore. Susan, please call the roll.
Mr. Blue,
Oh,
Ms. Sheridan. Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Manning,
Yes.
Mr. Now,
Yes?
Mr. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Wetmore,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
No.
so we have 6 to 3.
Okay, so the next motion is,
Is that a supermajority?
it's a 2/3, which is what is required, right? So now, Doug, your motion is to amend the resolution to require board approval of all SIF grants. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, all in favor of that? But we may as well just do a roll call on that as well and skip the.
Can I just ask a question? Because to Paul Manning's point, like, how exactly are we gonna have that work between now and March? Because from what I understand, there are some already very compelling needs to do matches between now and March. So can we have both the standard for the board to approval for going forward and approval now to give latitude between now and March? Because my sense is we do not want to disrupt what is already in the good flow of things. So
Can
I'm
we
just
just
trying to be
approve the specific things you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you.
Let's
Can
approve
we-
them right now.
That's what
Yeah.
you said.
Can we do that so that we can actually have a
agree.
successful between now and March, what we need to get done, and then we can,
That would be a separate motion, right?
okay?
Yeah. I'll have to ask the president about that. I mean, what do you want to do here?
Well, I really need to go to the bathroom.
Aside from that, which is not on the agenda.
So I was going to, not to interfere with your procedure, but I'm not sure that there's much of a difference between what Doug is suggesting and what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the permission. I'm asking for the board to say right now, for the rest of the campaign, it's not just to March, for the rest of the campaign, you can use SIF funds to match for scholarships and professorships along the lines that we've been doing during the campaign. I'm asking you for that permission. I'm also asking you for permission to match large gifts. And if you want to say the gift has to be over $20 million and you can't do more than 50 cents on the dollar, that's fine. So in a sense, I'm doing what you're asking. So I would focus on that, and then I would table whether it should be every project or only projects that are above $5 million until March. And we're not going to spend anything other than what I'm asking you to do between now and March. So I think that part is probably worth spending some time on to look at how many awards have we been issuing. Would it be a big deal if we needed to get permission for everyone as opposed to everyone over $5 million? But there's no time pressure on that. And I haven't looked at the awards or thought about, would this gum up the works too much if we needed to get permission for every project as opposed to projects over $5 million. But in a sense, you're preserving the argument. That is to say, you're preserving the principle that you can approve, because all I'm asking right now is that you approve the uses that I've described. And we're not going to spend anything else from SIF in between now and March. And then we can come back and decide, is it going to be every project or is it going to be only projects that are above a certain threshold? That's what I would
Is it to
suggest.
spend the entire 65 million?
What's that?
Is it to spend up to the 65 million in the next 3 months on the campaign? Or is there?
I would love to have that
That would be a
problem.
great problem to have. That would be an outstanding
I don't
outcome.
think that's going to happen.
Okay, then what's an appropriate number to set? And then we've still got a motion on the table to require.
What I would like to do is vote on my motion.
Yes.
And then if the president would like to make a proposal for the board to
Fair enough.
approve, which sounds eminently reasonable to me, what he said, under the rubric where the board reviews and approves projects, we take the proposal and listen to it and vote on it.
We have a motion on the table for the board to approve every project related to SIF. Is there a second?
Second.
Let's call the roll.
Mr. Blue,
No.
Ms. Sheridan,
I'm just struggling because I feel like, yes, I want approval. I am a yes, but I don't think this is an artful way to go about doing this.
Mr. Brown,
No.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Manning.
Yes, but we need to get some parentheses around this and get it more specific.
Yes, we all agree.
Mr. Now.
No.
Mr. Webb.
Yes.
Mr. Wetmore.
Yes.
Mr. Hardy.
No.
Okay, so we have,
All right, so that motion carries if I'm counting correctly.
yeah.
Okay, so we now have a resolution passed by the committee recommended to the full board that all projects be approved by the board, all SIF projects. Remaining on the table is the question of whether we are going to, as a committee, recommend to the full board to approve today, consistent with Doug's proposal, that giving the president the authorization to fund gifts, scholarships, whatever our third one is.
Large matching.
Large matches, up to a number that apparently we know it's less than 65, but beyond that, I'm not sure what Jim's
We
looking
just approve it
for.
up to 65.
So then up to 65
Through March.
through March, and then
He
come
said, no,
back.
he said
Through
till
the end of the
I think-
Well, I'm sorry, through the end of the campaign.
yeah,
Thank you.
June.
All right. Do we have a motion to first, to allow that as a walk-on resolution?
Yes.
So there is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Question.
Very good. Yes.
When is the end of the campaign?
June 30th.
June 30.
June 30.
May I ask a point of clarification?
You're the rector. You can ask anything you want.
Isn't this motion in conflict with the motion that was just passed?
No, I believe
No, it is-
the way I perceive it, it is quite consistent. We are, now that we've passed a motion that says the board approves, we're now going to recommend to the board to approve these uses up to that limit. Okay. Let's give this a shot.
So I think we need to vote on what you just said.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
So, but first, it's a
That's what I
procedural.
mean on the procedural part.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, now the actual substance of the resolution. Any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve it?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? How about that? Okay, so we are going to rapidly move through.
Oh my God.
We'll tell you later what we did. So we're going to move through medical center contracts, and then the most important part of the meeting, and I apologize, Mr. Rector, that we have run late, but I appreciate the conversation. I thought it was valuable.
So in page 21 of your board book is a request for signatory authority for the medical center contract. All the materials, I'll take any questions or just call for the motion.
Are there questions on the medical center contract? Are there any materials? Is there a motion to approve that signatory authority that's, there's a resolution on page 21 of the Finance Committee book?
So moved.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Okay.
Now, turning to an item for which there is
I know.
undoubtedly universal approval and disappointment at the same time.
We're not.
So it is with profound sadness and gratitude, I'd like to recognize an incredible, indelible leader here at UVA, Colette Sheehy. She notified us that she plans to retire, I'm gonna cry, at the end of June after nearly 43 years of service here at UVA. So one of the first two female vice presidents at UVA, and she's overseen an enormous portfolio, 2,500 employees strong, and with whom out, this university just quite simply wouldn't run. She has done everything from being budget director to literally answering every stupid question I've had in the last 6 years. Recently won the Thomas Jefferson Service Award, and the highest award that can be given to a university community member. She's instrumental to me 24/7, and I literally would not have learned this role without her. So her unmatched depth, experience, breadth of knowledge, incredible, hardworking, tenacious ability in Richmond. She's also a parent of a UVA graduate, So I just turn it to you, Chairman. It's a profound loss for UVA, but 43 years, I think it's okay to let her go.
I would just ask you to join me in a round of applause for Colette. We have flowers for you, Colette, but I'm not going to present them to you because I don't think I could lift them, but they are right there.
I would just say she is with us until July 1. We've asked to do many, many data dumps from her brain of all her expertise, and there will be appropriate events in the spring to recognize her, and we'll make sure you're all included in that. So thank you.
With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. I appreciate the conversation.
You have a break here? Or?
We are way over. We are way over, so if you need to take a break, please try to do it on your own accord, but I think we need to move forward. We're like 30 minutes over, so.